Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's realBluTV here, and another EU qualifier is in the books. Number 2 is now over, and that means we have another 2 teams in that 16-team bracket for that $8,000 event happening in very early January, probably in, I think, like 2 weeks, since, we only have 8 qualifiers. So if you're looking to play, or you think you have a chance at winning $8,000, which $6,000 goes to that first place team, in the CMG Road Company tournaments, then go ahead, sign up. I'll put the link in the description below. There'll also be a link to tonight's bracket, or the qualifier number 2's bracket, if you want to go ahead and check that out. But let's go ahead and let's jump right into it. And for those of you who've been asking, yes, we have some clips to show over top as well. So let's get right into this and let's talk about some of these teams. All right, so diving into this bracket, we had some really good teams that showed up. Some of the ones that stood out right away. We're going to mainly talk about the ones that made it to quarterfinals, as those are most of the teams that really stood out to me, especially when we look at some of the teams that didn't even make it past quarterfinals, but we've seen them in past tournaments before. Kind of like the team called the Frenchies. Frenchies have Mr. Brady, they have Rhea, they had a person named Chabda and Benny, or Benji, I think it is. Benji or Benny, whatever, I'm just going to call him Benny. Benny and Chabda haven't really seen anything from these players before. If you look at their CMG stats, it says they've played in a few tournaments. I think Benny has a silver and a gold, Chabda with a gold and a bronze, but really haven't seen these players before. But when it comes to Rhea and Brady, we've seen these two players, especially under the name Frenchies before, and in the Roco Showdown Phase 1, we've seen them compete against some other EU teams. They were a top 4 team, and actually Emis from Era Eternity used to play on this roster, so of course 2 new players coming in had to replace Emis as one of those. I can't remember off the top of my head who that 4th player was at this exact moment, but that was a good team, and now it's kind of, they have to rebuild because 50% of that team is gone now. So Brady and Rhea, I know they're good players. I know they can make it through. They were able to, win 3 matches in this tournament. Then they ended up losing to Gagoon squad, which was one of those teams we talked about in the last qualifying recap, and we're going to talk about that team a little bit more here in a second, as they were one of the 2 teams to qualify. Spoiler alert. Another team that made it into the quarterfinals that really stood out to me was Starless Esports. We've seen them make it into the main bracket of the North American qualifier. Now they're back trying to make it into the EU one. Again, NA teams can play in this tournament. They just can't host any of the games on their servers. They have to play on those EU servers. And we saw some of that coming into play with a lot of NA fixers choosing to use the Deadeye instead of the tier, which mainly points me towards Clo. And we're going to talk about that team in a little bit as well. But Starless Esports, Lonnie, Illusion, My Story, and Cincy, 4 solid players. They've been doing some good things together before, and now they're continuing to do that. They were able to beat, I believe, Aqualix and Rogue Knight. Rogue Knight, a pretty tough team in the bracket right now for the time being. They have a solid roster themselves, but then they lose to Clo and Fantastic Rats in those quarterfinals. So look for Starless Esports to make a bigger run coming up, as they did in the NA qualifiers. They were still making decent runs early on. Once those teams that they kept losing to started to either be on the other side of the bracket or qualify themselves, that's when Starless was able to get a qualifier in and make it into that main bracket. So I have confidence in this team in making it into another main bracket themselves. Another team to look out for was RRXD. This is actually a European team. They played in Roco Showdown themselves. They were the number 2 seed going into the playoffs, behind what was Orgless Roco, which, half of those players are on Era Eternity as well now. So this is a big roster. I mean, they've got Smarty, Delzy, Reels, and Ronberg. These are 4 solid players. Sometimes they have a little bit of off game between themselves, and when that happens is when days like today happened for them, and they were not able to make it out of quarterfinals. They had a tough matchup, though. They went up against another team we'll talk about here in a second, and that was Stream Snipers. That's another European team with some big names on it as well, and we'll get into that. But they were able to beat they beat Ambitions, and they beat Bad Bitches as well. Shout out to that team name. It is with a Z as well, so big ups to RRXD. Look for this team to make it into the main bracket. I guarantee they will make it in there. If I'm wrong, you can dog my shit in the comments, but I think RRXD have a for sure chance of making it into that main bracket. Another team that made it to quarterfinals was Winning Chimpanzee 1909, another one of those, default CMG names. But these are three names that we've heard before. Schmeike is their fourth player. Haven't really seen any of his play, so small sample size from him, although he has 8 trophies on CMG under his name and a 45-17 win-loss. So I think that's around over $500 at the time being. So he is on the expert skill level on CMG. So I'm just looking to see more of a sample size from him playing so that I can kind of, analyze and gauge what I can see from him. But the other 3 players on the team, Detox, Neg, and Magnus, we've seen these 3 players countless times. We know Detox is a solid player. We know Neg can do some solid things, especially on things like Anvil. And we know Magnus does amazing things with the MXR in his hand, whether he's playing the Dahlia or the Trench, like we've seen him play before. So look for this team to make it into the main bracket as well. They were able to beat Humble, Iced Out, and Airborne Gaming, which are 3 teams that showed up in both qualifiers. So they've got some games under their belt as well. But they did not end up beating 7 Deadly Sins, who was our other team that ended up qualifying into the main bracket tonight. But let's talk about the semifinals. Semifinals, we saw Forever in Semis, I think is what their name changed to, but they were going under Fantastic Rats. And again, they made it pretty deep in the first qualifying bracket. Now they make it to the semis again in the second qualifying bracket. That's Maestro, Crump, Fathom, and Clo. Clo was doing amazing things on the fixer, and he was using the Deadeye DMR instead of the tier. Maybe it was because he is more comfortable with that gun, or it also could be because of the EU ping. He doesn't want to try and snipe, or it could be because of any changes that came to fixer, maybe the aim assist nerf on PC with controller, or maybe just some fixer changes overall persuaded him to go. So any of those options could be the reason why he went with that Deadeye. Maybe he just likes that gun and thinks that he can get, a lot more done with it than he can the tier. Again, maybe he's just more comfortable with it. But he was doing some amazing things with it. Crump was doing some good things as well. Maestro was kind of the wild card for them. Is he going to be able to help them out, especially on the defensive side? But he was able to help them to get them as far as the semis. But the real standout player, I think, was Fathom. There were a few times where Fathom looked really good, and then there were some games in total where 8-9 rounds in, he's only got 2 downs. He's been first pick on the team as well, so not really contributing as much as we've seen him contribute to a team in the past. So just needs to step up that play, and I would have no fear in saying that Fantastic Rats will make it into the main bracket with this exact lineup. The other team which made it into the semifinals. By the way, that Fantastic Rats was a North American team. There's 4 teams in semis. 2 of them were from the European region, 2 of them from the NA, and they both had to play each other. So NA versus EU on each side. We could have seen a double NA team in the grand finals, or we could have seen a double EU team. We ended up seeing just one NA team and one EU team, but we'll talk about that here in a second. After we talk about Stream Snipers, who were able to beat a couple decent teams. They beat Allison Borderland, Nice Coella, which we saw with a very decent roster in the first qualifier. We've seen them beat the Loud. They beat RRXD, which again, I said it was at one point in time, the second best EU team. And then they lost to 7 Deadly Sins, but that matchup was very interesting to watch. There was some great plays, and it went pretty much both ways the entire time. But this roster, Fank, which I think used to play on Orgless Roco, great player within himself. We have Zaxi, who is one of those EU staples that's been around since the early alpha days. And then, of course, Queep, who has been, or Keep, who is one of the alpha players that, stated they were going to play competitively and has been grinding since those days to play at this high level. So those are 3 great players. And then the 4th player, someone I'm super familiar with, Prosper Logic, who is the back-to-back console league MVP in Paladins, both in 2019 and 2019. He's arguably a top 3 all-time Paladins console player. And, to me, I think he was the best European DPS player in that scene. So it's good to see him transfer his skills over to the Rogue Company scene. If this roster can stick together, Prosper can start doing things, similar to what he was doing in the Paladin scene on console with his controller in his hand. I know he's got a PC now, so better frame rates, better refresh rate on that monitor as well. Look for this team to do some big things. So Stream Snipers, look for them to start making some plays, and I could potentially see them making it, qualifying for the main event in the very next qualifier, number 3 right here. especially if they can get things hot and they keep that momentum going. But in the finals, we saw Gagoon Squad versus 7 Deadly Sins, Gagoon Squad being an all-EU team. And the reason why I point that out is because 7 Deadly Sins, 4 players, 3 of them from NA, and from what I've been told, again, Codener is from EU and he plays on that squad. Again, people have been telling me that's the best EU player, but you know, we got to see more from him. We saw a lot more from him tonight. Some especially great plays, especially with those DMRs in his hand. And they were able to win. 7 Deadly Sins taking the victory. They get the large chunk of the $250 prize from the qualifying winnings. But they will be the 3rd seed going into the main bracket, and we'll show that in just a second. But Gagoon Squad again, Fanatics, Welshmania, Toot and Closar doing some great things. Toot was being an anchor for his team, and he's used to doing that as he was a tank player in Paladins. Welshmania, I mean, there was on Icarus pistol round, he goes 1v4, like legit 1v4, and takes out the entire squad himself. So already on the fixer with the warrant, Welshmania is feeling very comfortable. We saw him playing snipers and paladins too, so maybe that is why it transferred over and he's so comfortable with it. Fanatics was also kind of popping off and kind of surprising to me. I know Fanatics to be a solid player in Paladins. I've seen him play dozens and dozens of games, but I didn't know how well he'd transfer over to this game. But to prove me wrong, he's doing a great job, especially when he's playing the Vi with that Nightshade and the utility usage from his Vi poisons and his lethal, the Incense grenade. I mean, he was doing great things, especially on canals. He was able to throw some nice fire nades right into connector. He was getting doubles on his own, even when the fight didn't look like it would go his way. So some great play from Gagoon Squad. Unfortunately, 7 Deadly Sins with Codener, Ink, Leo, and Pix, they were able to take the victory 2-0 in the finals. Pretty close game in the second one. The first game was a 7-3. I believe it wasn't as close, but that High Castle game got pretty intense for both sides on offense and defense. Didn't really matter as both were going back and forth the entire time. I got to give credit to 7 Deadly Sins. I don't think they've been expecting, I mean, especially when you see a tweet from Pick saying, the same strats aren't going to work for everyone or all the time. Things got to shake it up. And we saw that, 7 Deadly Sins, they were shaking things up. They were kind of changing their strategies up. Meanwhile, on the other side, 4 players who haven't grinded or been in as many tournaments, being Gagoon Squad, they were kind of running some default strats, and they were working until 7 Deadly Sins said, you know what, they're running these default strats. We have to go back in the playbook and do what we know works against that and figure out how to get around that. And they started to do that, especially on High Castle when the default B defends were coming in from Gagoon Squad. 7 Deadly Sins were able to work around it and get the victory that they needed. But that's pretty much it. So there you have it. Qualifier number 1, T1 takes the number 1 seed. Era Attorney takes the number 2 seed. I don't think anyone would disagree that those were the 2 teams we thought would be number 1 and number 2. Could have gone either way for the seeding as well, but they would be the top 2. Most of us have guessed. And then qualifier number 2, which just ended, 7 Deadly Sins takes that number 3 seed, and Gagoon Squad taking the number 4 seed. And that's pretty much it. The next qualifier, number 3, will be on Saturday, I believe the 26th. I don't believe there'll be a CMG stream for that one, so you're going to have to kind of just hop around into some POVs from the players streaming themselves and see what you can watch and see if there's any entertaining games. Of course, I think there will be. Again, there's some great teams left in the pool that will sign up for this open bracket and try to take that, 5 and 6 seed in that 3rd qualifier. And then the 4th qualifier will be the next day on Sunday. Remember, it's a European tournament, but North American teams and players are allowed to play. I mean, this is awesome too, because we get to see the different metas from EU and NA clash. We get to see those players clash, and hey, we can even see some more teams like 7 Deadly Sins that have EU and NA players mixed together, albeit it's only 1 from EU on that roster out of the 4. But hey, as long as they're working together, and it'll be interesting to see how these players can play against each other. North America can still play. They can't host, but hey, they get the opportunity to play against some great EU players, and vice versa for the EU kids as well. My name is realBluTV. You can follow me on Twitter at realBluTV with no E in blue. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this video if you're interested. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that's going to harp you about it at the beginning of the video. I wait till the end. But hey, I love watching Roco. I hope you guys do too. Keep grinding and enjoy your holiday break, everyone.